Well, first of all, I want to thank Joan and Erica and Martha for organizing the River Road series. And also, I'm honored to read with Karen McPherson and Martha Gatchell. And thanks to all of you for being here. I'm going to start out with It's Hard to Describe. It's hard to describe how being gone for 2 years altered my understanding of time, space, and desire. I moved my parents' furniture into my 900 square foot 1946 bungalow. Glass doorknobs, curved doorways, firwood floors, scrollwork and engraving on the champagne tinted lamps. They call it a working man's house, built after World War II. That morning, as we moved furniture under the sharp blue summer sky, the day cascaded and rose in the heavy heat. All the glassware Mother collected in 5 decades of domestic living and working, somehow arranged artfully in my cottage. The screwdriver the young movers left by the bed. Everything seems to have changed. Apartment buildings on the rise in the city, the end of a relationship, a movie theater closing, a good friend has left town for the cobbled streets of Belgium. Maybe I was gone too long. This poem is called Telling Us. You took photographs of cabbage plants on the evergreen coastal path, art study for a painting. You said you already had the canvas. I immersed myself in the ocean mist. We met again late in the afternoon. The sun was setting on a beach full of rocks. Round amber agates, rusty red stones, white shells of clams and crabs left behind, like lights of the city. Midnight grays, silent and alone. Resting on the edge of the rocky bank, waves turned round rocks over and over, churning, washed them back up on the beach. We heard the clicking, rattling of rocks against rocks. The bones of the sea told us to begin. The next poem is called Tin Coyote, which is the name of my book. And there's a story behind this poem. I work up in Corvallis on Wednesdays, and so I'm always in a rush to get up there, so I go by way of I-5, and then on the way back, I take the leisurely drive on 99 through Harrisburg and Monroe. And one week I looked out in the field towards the coastal foothills, and I saw a coyote way out in the field. The next week I saw the same coyote, I thought. And then the third week, I realized the coyote hadn't moved. So it was a scarecrow, a tin coyote, and so it inspired this poem. Tin Coyote. Coyote lurks in fields off Highway 99, north of Irish Bend and Old River. He works hard to keep crows and gulls from the rows, dependable ally gazing over rolling hills. Coyote spins around and around with the wind, worthy protector, daunting adversary, paper tiger. His presence, lack of blood, bone, or soft gray fur tinged with white. His eyes, green, gold, sparkle, shine with wisdom. Canine teeth flash, life not given. Coyote knows his job well. Coyote doesn't rest, but stands a cool sentry. He guards young plants which will grow into ripe produce. Yellow turnips, kale, and mint to take to market. Purple, green, red, burgundy grapes to pour into a bottle of Pinot Noir. Where's Coyote's family? In the mountains, waiting for his return from his long day's work. This poem is called Along the Siuslaw, and you may recognize some familiar landmarks. It's the drive from here to Florence. and I enjoy going to the coast whenever I can. Along the Siuslaw River, railroad tracks and twist and spiral around granite mountain slopes, slide under a canopy of Douglas firs around rocky ridges through canyons and culverts. Pure stream of river water flows below the trestle, Sweet Creek, Knowles Creek, tributaries, steep hills and gullies down a mountain road. Rocks roll through a stand of snags stripped of their limbs. Ghostly shadows, broken trees, stand alone in ponds, sloughs, lowland streams off the Siuslaw. Emerging from the long tunnel through the mountain, sunlight ricochets at the end of the dark passage. Trees, different shades of green, cascade down the hill, meet boat ramps and docks on the river. Along the railroad tracks, a few horses graze in a meadow full of wildflowers, blue lupin, scarlet bergamot, and huckleberry. Old mill closed, house on stilts. There was a time when cutting trees knew no limit. Mill's quiet now, wood dryer pyramid-shaped, weather-beaten, left standing. Winding around the North Fork of the Siuslaw, train tracks roll into the small timber town of Mapleton. Frank's Tavern and the Alphabet Cafe appear across the road. This poem is called Spain in December. Christmas morning in Sieges, Spain, strong Moroccan coffee. Music like an Arabian ocean floats through the curtains in our room. Blue air and art. Shadows like paintings fall across the landscape. Oranges, lemons, shrimp and squid. Sangria, citrus bobbing in a glass. Light reflects, refracts, creating space and possibility. There is still time. The sun, an orange orb, December light in Spain. This poem actually has a footnote on it, and I debated quite a bit as to whether to put a footnote on a poem, but I think it's appropriate here. It's about Shakyamuni, or Siddhartha, expresses in the Lotus Sutra in the 12th chapter that women can attain Buddhahood, and an 8-year-old female dragon represents women in that chapter of the Lotus Sutra. The Dragon King's daughter attained Buddhahood quickly by practicing the Lotus Sutra. So there's a reference to her in the poem. Also, there's a poem by John O'Donohue. He's a Catholic priest, and he wrote The Interim Time. So this poem kind of combines West and East. It's a short poem. There's a lot going on here. And the interim time, the time between when a change begins and then the final resolution. So being able to sustain oneself through that period of time. Nye Beach. Sundown in the azure sky. Gray and white streaks, wisps on the horizon. The brilliant yellow sun says goodbye, makes an exit. Waves consistent, white peaks roar, spray. The Dragon King's daughter attains Buddhahood as she is, her profile outlined in the driftwood on the beach. Children scatter, a barking dog. Voices skip across the sand, echo in the translucent air. Now, what's to come in the interim? Transformation at the water's edge as the waves slide, crash over the rocky precipice. This poem is a fairly new poem. It's called Freight Train, Eugene to Portland, and it was published in Cirque recently. when I think back, I was 20 at the time, and I was quite enamored with Jack Kerouac and his adventures, and actually wanted to emulate him. And so I convinced a friend to hop a freight train with me here in Eugene and ride up to Portland. And it took us about 6 or 7 hours to get up there. It was a long ride. And actually the engineer saw us get on in Eugene, and he walked all the way back. The train stopped in Corvallis. He walked all the way back and stopped at where we were, and he said, "Do you girls travel this way often?" We were pretty quiet at that point, but he proceeded to tell us all the horror stories of what could happen, that the door could slam shut, nobody would ever know we were in there, a load could shift, or there were people that were, convicts that had escaped from prison that ride the rails. And so, needless to say, he scared the dickens out of us, but it was quite an adventure. Freight train, Eugene to Portland. It occurred to me during the fall of 1982, riding a freight train from Eugene to Portland with my girlfriend Kate, that anyone who was an English major at an American university had read On the Road by Jack Kerouac. We hide between two shabby freight cars, graffiti covering the doors, wait for our chance. The railroad engineer had just passed on his rounds. We climb the thin metal rungs of the train ladder, jump into the freight car, huddle together as the wagon lurches and jerks forward on up north toward Portland. In the afternoon, the red and orange leaves blow across silver-plated tracks. The scent of autumn smoke lingers in the brisk air. Sun beams down from the powder blue sky. We hear the steady rhythm of railroad cars clicking over the tracks. This poem is in the anthology, It Demands a Wildness of Me. This is a collection of poems from a critique group I was in for 10 years, over 10 years, and Sharon and Nancy Moody are here, and they were in that group, part of that group at different times. But it was quite it had quite a beneficial effect on my writing, and so this poem is called Black Bear, and I have read an article about a small town in Maine where a bear walked into town, and so I imagined what all the citizens of that small town would have thought. Black Bear. The black bear wanders into town, spotted first in Ferguson's yard, and again at the Mitchells by the red garden shed. No one seems upset by his presence. McCarty dashes into his house, finds his binoculars in the bedroom dresser drawer. We wait patiently, taking turns with the binoculars. I notice details of the bear's winter coat, thick with red tones, his huge claws curved 2 inches from his toes. We observe the bear brush up against the fence, amble across the meadow in Legacy Park, back up through the white yarrow and blue morning glories into the stand of Douglas firs behind Max O'Brien's cottage. I think of the other bears up in the hills above the valley, less to sustain them, few provisions from which to forage. I know I'll see this bear again next spring. McCarty hears his wife call over the fence, gives a shrug, turns and leaves through the gate. I look up overhead, wave after wave of Canadian geese honk, fly in an audible rippling formation, calling to each other anxiously. And another poem from this book, this anthology. I grew up in Portland, and So when I got my first bike as a kid, it was my ticket to freedom. And then as I got a little bit older, I got actually a racing bike. It was a second-hand bike, but it was Italian made, and so I was pretty attached to it. Vittorio. When I was almost 9, I rode my 10-speed through a Portland neighborhood, past row after row of white clapboard houses, to the little mom-and-pop grocery store on the corner. Leaned my luminous steed against the lamppost, unlocked. The U-shaped handlebars formed like the horns of a wild ram, a brilliant metallic blue with the brand Vittorio, Vittorio stamped on the frame, Vittorio, a regal lion roaring, mouth open, red tongue surrounded by a royal Italian crest, circled with olive branches. Dashing out of the store, ice cream sandwich in hand, my bike was gone. Vaporized, disappeared. It left a mark, like a slap on the face, hot and red. I was so proud of my birthday gift. I patrolled the blacktop streets in southeast Portland, hunting for my bike. So if you've had something stolen, you remember that for quite a long time. The next poem is called Canadians in San Francisco, and it's a poem about my parents. I'm actually, I was born on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, so I do have, I think, I'm pretty sure I have dual citizenship, which, could come in handy at some point. I joke about that, but now it's becoming a little more realistic or serious. But Canadians are a little different than Americans. I mean, they're a little more reserved in some ways. I think people often say they're nice and they're polite, but they are a little more reserved. Canadians in San Francisco. A photograph of my parents walking down a Main Street sidewalk in San Francisco, maybe Market Street. Scandinavian in his best suit and tie, he tall, blonde, and slim. She, shorter, dark, wearing a long coat. A cloche hat fits snugly on her head. Her dark hair peeks out, her lips red with fresh lipstick. Just married, they were on their honeymoon. Both looked directly at the camera, smiling, pleased. The sidewalk photographer knew they were newlyweds, full of hope. They had each found the right person. The film Pathfinder is on a movie marquee in the background of the photo. My dad holds his overcoat over his right arm. His left hand looks like it's grasping my mother's hand, but her hand is held alongside his hand. They don't show affection in public. They were Canadians. And I'm going to end with Interstate 5 from the chapbook, Transcending Damnation Creek Trail. And I do have some broadsides that are available for anybody that wants to take one of Interstate 5. Interstate 5. Driving Interstate 5 from Eugene to Albany, I pass, let me try that again. Interstate 5. Driving Interstate 5 from Eugene to Portland, I pass Albany pulp and paper boxcars filled with sawdust. The Lucky Eagles casino sign, mileposts that fly by like a bullet train, shout out the distance to go, motels with a view of the beach. Green state highway signs announce the radio station for a weather report. Harley motorcycles, manufactured homes. While traveling in France, I went to see One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, filmed in Oregon. During the credits, a flash of Interstate 5 rolled by. Homesick for the winding black ribbon that runs up and down the valley, rock quarries, horses lying down to rest in fields along the highway, rain-drenched Sundays. I took out my wallet, and held my return ticket between my palms. Thank you.